This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the July 21 South Whitehall Township Planning Commission meeting. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Greg, would you like to do the roll call?
Absolutely. Trevor Dombach.
Here.
Tim Dugan.
Here.
Andrew Flagg.
Here.
Brian Height.
Here.
Diane Kelly. Not present. Mark Luth. Not present. David Wilson.
Here.
We have 5 members present. That is sufficient for a quorum.
I would also like to note township staff and subconsultants who are here. We have Greg Knoll, Township Planner, David Manhart, Director of Community Development, Laura Harrier, Zoning Officer, Jennifer Alderfer from Zader Law, who's the Assistant Township Solicitor, and Tony Tellerita from the Pitcock Company, who is the Township Engineer. Greg Adams. Getting my names mixed up, sorry. Yep. All right, meeting rules?
Meeting rules. For an orderly meeting wherein all attendees may be fully able to participate, we ask that you adhere to the following rules. Please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid background noise that may cause interference in the meeting and make it difficult for others to hear. Staff may mute microphones of remote attendees if needed. Public questions and comments will be taken at periodic intervals throughout the agenda. We will start with no time limits, but the Planning Commission Chairman may impose a time limitation if there are many questions or if the meeting is running short on time. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed and state your name, address, and comment or question. Please turn the podium microphone on before speaking and off when done. For remote attendees, the chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address in the chat box. When you are recognized and so directed, please unmute your microphone and state your comment or question. Mute your microphone when done. For those who are accessing the meeting by phone only, staff will periodically ask for caller comments and unmute any callers. Callers must identify their name and address prior to making comment. Your cooperation and adherence to these rules will ensure an orderly and respectful meeting. Thank you.
All right, agenda item number 3, review and approval of minutes. We have the May 19th and May 24th meeting minutes. We'll start with the May 19 minutes. Anyone have any edits or comments for the May 19 meeting minutes? There are no comments. I'll make a motion to approve. All in favor, say aye. Oh, sorry.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion moved. May 24th meeting minutes. Any comments or edits?
Greg, I don't recall if this was the section that required the amendment or if you already made it in the packet that I pointed out. Whenever the election of officers occurred, the minutes at some point referenced Mr. Tope being elected. It should be Mr. Luth.
Should be Mr. Luth, correct.
It's agenda item 5 on page 3 of 3, last line.
I'm still not finding what page that's on.
17.
Okay.
No, you hadn't voted yet.
All right, we'll make a motion
If you'd make a motion
to
to approve with the correction.
with corrections.
Okay.
So moved.
Do a motion and then
Oh,
a second.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the edit on page 3 of 3 to state Mr. Luth instead of Mr. Tope.
Okay, and then was there a second? Then you call for a roll call. All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion moved. All right, agenda item number 4, comprehensive plan review.
So comprehensive plan review, we had the workshop meeting earlier in the month. We went through, so we're in the process of going through a lot of the transportation comments, trying to go through the Mentimeter polling and put it all together into a much more simplified goals and strategies. In addition to that, at that meeting, we presented the housing and community facilities goals and strategies. We did make some changes to the community facilities. We felt that after the conversations that they weren't exactly lining up and consistent with the other goals and strategies. So we kind of tweaked it, primarily layout and how things were worded. So that's all been placed on the website under the working draft. So that has those new community facility goals and strategies. So if you get a chance, review those. If there's anything you'd like to comment, please do so. The next comprehensive plan workshop in August, sorry, I forget the date, 9th. We will review the transportation goals and strategies, as well as start the land use conversation, which is kind of we'll have some maps prepared and go over some defining characteristics of we're looking at planning areas, is kind of how we're going to tackle it. So we have a little bit, we can approach it in smaller pieces rather than looking at the whole township. So we'll begin that discussion and then again, solicit comment, conversation, and we'll take those and come back at the September meeting with the draft of the land use plan. That's where we're at.
All right, thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Agenda item number 5, subdivision review. We have one project on the agenda, and it's Allentown Duncan drive-through, request for preliminary final plan review. Greg, I'll hand it off to you for the staff presentation.
This is an application to further develop the property at 4793 Tillman Street. The plan proposes to construct a drive-through window, a reconfigured drive-through lane, 2 order menu boards, an additional 4,310 square feet of impervious surface, and stormwater management controls on a 3.37 acre portion of the 21.35 acre tract. The subject property is served by public and water and sewer and is zoned Highway Commercial Special Heights Limitation HC1. Allentown Town Center, Allentown, PALP, is the owner and applicant. This project had been previously at the Planning Commission in September 16th, 2021, where the Planning Commission reviewed and took under advisement. At this point, the Community Development Department recommends that the Planning Commission take the plan under advisement to afford the applicant the time necessary to address the reviewing agency's comments. Our recommendation is contingent upon the applicant granting the township a waiver from the time frame in which to act upon the plan. The Planning Commission's soft deadline to act on the plan is August 15th, 2022. The Board of Commissioners' hard deadline to act on the plan is September 14th, 2022.
All right, the applicant may present their project.
Good evening. Thanks, Greg, for that. Yes, we were here before back in September 2021 and reviewed this proposal with the Planning Commission members here. And as Greg mentioned, we are proposing to introduce a drive-through here for the Dunkin' Donuts, which is the end cap tenant of that retail strip closest to Tillman Street. So we worked with the township engineer on a few different phone calls. We met with the safety commission as well to try to come up with a plan that could help alleviate the concerns of the movements into and out of the drive-through area. So I guess essentially with the review that we recently got on this plan, I just wanted to go over really the three main items, I guess. We have a few waivers regarding sidewalks and deferments that we'd like to talk about. There's a couple other waivers here that are supported by the engineer as far as information required within 400 feet of the site, things of that nature. But essentially, we have the sidewalk locations and extent of sidewalks that are proposed with the project. Secondly, we want to talk about the main entry point to the drive-through and the improvements that have been made to the proposal from where we were in the original proposal to where we are now. And then thirdly, just to kind of maybe jump this ahead, outside of the waivers and the sidewalks and the access point and the safety of the maneuver into the drive-through area, we generally have we are generally will comply with the remainder of the township consultant's review. So the comments raised by Mr. Talarita generally are all will comply. We'll be able to address those and comply with those. Again, just going back to, I guess, the main concerns focused around the entry of the drive-through area. And then also we can get back into the waiver. So I guess going with the issue at hand being the drive-through entrance. So the original proposal for this project, if you recall, proposed to have the drive-through as shown and to provide only do not block the box signage as you enter the shopping center for cars that need to make a left into the drive-through area to access the drive-through for the Dunkin' Donuts. At the time, we presented that to the township. There was concern that the traffic would not guard that do not block the box and it would be blocked, and there could be potential for cars to stop and wait for a clearance, and then that would impact the stacking or the approach from Tillman Street and potentially stack vehicles into Tillman Street. So what we did with the application is we took the drive-through area, the parking area in front of the Dunkin', which is currently today vertical angled spaces that creates a one-way circulation around the triangular parking area there. And we reoriented that to allow for cars to enter the shopping center on Tillman and continue straight rather than needing to make an immediate left. So if you're entering the shopping center and Dunkin' Donuts, a drive-through customer wants to use the drive-through, we're providing them signage and direction to travel straight rather than making that left to circulate the reoriented parking area and to come around the parking lot and approach the main intersection from Tillman Street at basically a right angle so that they have clear sight to make a safe crossing to enter the drive-through queuing. So we presented that to the Safety Commission a few months ago. They were generally open-minded to that proposal, knowing that we were trying to, again, alleviate that left turn movement immediately coming in off of Tillman Street. We have the do not block the box there still, so that is maintained as a free and open area, and that customers using the shopping center can follow the guidance of the traffic do not block the box and keep that area open. Our traffic signal control plan has been worked out with PennDOT to modify and to review the capacity of the traffic signal to ensure that providing that gap in the stacking that leaves the shopping center is not impacted by the green time. So our traffic folks have kind of, I feel like, worked that out to be able to work in that the traffic signal at Tillman Street and the exit movements from the shopping center will not be affected by the gap of the do not block the box that causes the clear open intersection as you enter the drive-through. So what we did was, again, we tried to make this a way for customers using the drive-through to come straight into the shopping center and circulate rather than being requested to make that left immediately to enter the drive-through. So a couple other things about this, just to reorient ourselves with the tenant being Dunkin' Donuts and the shopping center where it's located. The Dunkin' Donuts peaks are much different than the shopping center. So a majority of the turning maneuvers that are going to occur into this drive-through will be off peak from the main peak hours of the shopping center itself. So we do not anticipate that the use of that drive-through is going to interfere with some of the peak times of the shopping center. The Dunkin' Donuts closes at a more earlier time than some of the other retailer users may be open, especially some of the restaurants, pizza shops, Chinese restaurants, and such. And we just feel like the peak times for the Dunkin' Donuts will allow for a safer ways to get into this drive-through. Although it is a tough intersection to make this turn, we feel that the interior parking lot modifications to help alleviate that left turn into the drive-through stacking area, can be, adequately achieved and safely achieved. We can also provide additional no left turn signage if needed to really make sure that customers do enforce that straight through movement rather than the ability to make a left coming in off the Tillman Street access. So I feel like there's still a concern from the consultants that is leading to the recommendation that this plan does not move forward. I know the Safety Commission also has continued to express their concerns with some of the directional signage and the signage not being adhered to by the customers. And this is the only option for the Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, this is their current location. They're very interested in achieving a drive-through here. They have, and maybe Mr. Alan Ripley here, who represents the owner of the shopping center, if needed, he can be asked about some of the tenant requirements as far as their leasing goes. But I think there is a time frame on Dunkin' Donuts lease that is asking for a drive-through with the potential that they could vacate the space. So this is the location of the Dunkin' Donuts. We're trying to accommodate how best to make the drive-through work. As you can see on the plan from a queuing analysis of the drive-through, there's adequate parking and adequate queuing for the drive-through lanes themselves. There's over 16 vehicles potentially that can stack in here. Dunkin' Donuts usually sees max stacking of 9 to 11 vehicles during their heavy peak times. So there'll be adequate room within this corner of the shopping center to house the queuing and the amount of customers that they expect on their highest peak. So really the main concern is really the entry into the drive-through area. We feel like we've taken the necessary steps to try to make this as safe and visible as possible so that there isn't a conflicting traffic movement and even if somebody does now block the box, as they exit the shopping center, we're giving those customers the ability to stay straight and to circulate the reoriented parking area to approach that drive-through from the opposite side of the intersection. So we're kind of here to meet with the Planning Commission to just kind of talk through this again. Kind of feel like we're at a little bit of a stalemate with the town consultants and where we're at with this plan. And as I mentioned, the remaining comments outside of resolving this concern are all will comply. We do have the waivers on, a couple waivers that we can discuss as well. But that's really the main reason we're here tonight, is to get the Planning Commission's feedback again, to see if this is something that they can see being supportive Because we're kind of, I think we're kind of running out of options here to try to come up with a drive-through plan that works for Dunkin', can be safe in this corner, and can operate functionally.
Thank you.
And
I'll say I appreciate the engineering, but unfortunately, I respectfully disagree. I think you've been given the responsibility for an impossible task. It seems we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I can't see how that layout works without causing problems. We do have a Planet Fitness there that is 24 hours. There's a Orange Theory Fitness gym there as well, and there's plenty of traffic during the morning AM peak hour. I drive by there every day. I'll open it up to the
Yeah.
board, but I personally don't see how that works.
My question is based on, Dunkin's got 8,500 to 10,000 stores. Is there another location that has this setup?
It would be some research I'd have to do, but
But that would be like, show us that this works,
yeah.
you know, rather than conceptual. And I kind of disagree with your peak hour of Dunkin'. I've seen Dunkin' on Hamilton and Haynes Mill actually back out to Haynes Mill Road.
Mhm.
And that had to be almost 20 cars, depending on if somebody has a situation, wrong order, whatever, you know, things can back up.
Mhm.
And there's stuff in your documents about 30-foot trucks would only be allowed. And your image right here shows a tractor trailer that had come in that way rather than the long way around from the old Kmart's. So it's kind of, you're trying to retrofit something without enough space to do it. So that's just my thoughts.
There,
One concern that I would add is, in what I've seen in the traffic review, there's a fair amount of stacking internally, but nothing really showcased for the exiting stacking that would end up occurring. You know, traffic's going to have an issue coming out onto Tillman, even if they have the advantage of the light, and then you're going to run into conflicts, you know, in the do not enter box or don't block the box. You know, the concept of the drive-through is quick in and quick out. And even with a couple options on the exit, I still would anticipate there's going to be foot traffic, pedestrian traffic coming in and out. There's going to be a big issue with a lot of this is the reliance upon every driver to knowingly understand and abide by this unique flow. And that's drivers that are customers to Dunkin', drivers that are customers to the rest of the shopping center. And honestly, with the location being where it is, it's a big open parking lot. Lost, distracted drivers are going to be pulling in there. There's people that commute and park in there, whether they're allowed to or not, I don't know. But it's a very active parking lot. So,
And to expound upon his thoughts is there's also employees that park behind the building. There's garbage dumpsters back there. There's a lot more going on back there than people probably realize, you know.
If you want to speak, you need to speak into the microphone.
Yeah, it's
Or,
A few questions with the traffic study. It was based on a 60-40 split. I would believe an 80-20 or even 75-25 split may be more realistic. And then was the empty Kmart, was that accounted for in the traffic study?
I believe it was I actually know it was not, I don't believe, because we took real-time counts of the intersection.
Another concern is the vehicles leaving the pickup window, they have to encroach over the crosswalk. You're not, in order to see the entire clear sight triangle.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so in regards to that, we did run around the option of potentially removing that column and structurally, modifying that corner. So if that becomes a sticking point, that's something we can always revisit. We felt that this would at least, with modifying that front parking area, we can pull that stop bar out a little further. Yes, beyond this crosswalk, but at least give that person the ability to have the view shed looking north. But yes, they would proceed forward beyond the crosswalk. Because one of the items was bringing a sidewalk over to the medical office to allow for access or foot traffic from their facility into the shopping center a little bit more easier than maybe what they do today. So that's why that's positioned the way it is. But yes, to your point, you would need to pull forward.
Then you mentioned you worked on the traffic signal permit plan with PennDOT. Was courtesy copies provided to the township engineer of that submission?
I believe so. I know they were not. I'll have to.
I don't believe we saw him.
I'll have to check with my traffic team. That may still be in PennDOT's court, but I'll confirm with them. Any other comments there?
I mean, just a general comment, a concern that I have with traffic is folks taking a right and just kind of flying into the entrance.
Yeah.
Scheme kind of is now. People obeying traffic patterns and rules.
Yeah, and that was the original proposal didn't provide for that straight through clockwise maneuver through the parking lot and reordinate. So we tried to get those people into the shopping center, and then if they want to drive through, to kind of go around and get out of the intersection. So to alleviate that, but it still kind of is a circuitous route.
And people always take the shortest path, no matter the signage.
Okay. Well, if
You're in a tight spot there.
yeah.
Yeah, and just to be direct, I personally don't see what can be done to retrofit this existing Dunkin' Donuts for a drive-through. It's just an impossible situation, existing condition to retrofit, in my opinion.
We appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I concur with Mr. Wilson. It's just, I appreciate that, you're trying to satisfy the franchise and I understand the pandemic has
Yeah.
accelerated drive-through options. I mean, think if another pandemic hits and everything's drive-through, your queuing numbers are out the window along with everything else, But it's, you got a lot going on and no space. And I think you probably realize that, and you're trying the best for your client, but I think there's also an aspect that we have to do what's best for the township.
Absolutely. No, appreciate the feedback, and I think we'll take this back under advisement and then we can be in touch, Greg, and kind of more formally figure out Does that work?
Great. Courtesy of the floor, anyone in the audience, online? We make a motion to take this under advisement.
Do you need a time extension?
I do. Not immediately, though. You have a few months to execute that. So
We're still on.
if you want to do it tonight, that's fine. If not,
You can always
I'll be in
communicate afterwards.
touch.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, we'll make a motion to take this under advisement. Roll call.
I'll second.
Roll call vote. Trevor Dombach.
Yeah, we'll take it under advisement.
Tim Dugan. Andrew Flagg.
Agreed.
Brian Height.
Aye.
David Wilson.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, ordinance amendment.
If you don't mind, I'm going to move out there.
Oh,
So I can see you better, do a little face-to-face instead of,
you want to read the room?
hanging back.
Going to stand for all this?
I've been sitting all day, so
Right.
be nice to finally, get up and be a little active.
I've been there.
Yeah. Okay, so for the audience at home, which we don't have, for anybody who may actually watch this recording, I'll read the background. This is the Planning Commission first look for zoning ordinance service pack 2C. Work began in zoning ordinance service pack 2B was begun January 2018, and the amendment was adopted April 1st, 2019. Since then, staff has been compiling lists of corrections and typographical errors, clarifications, improvements, and minor proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance. Staff feels that there are sufficient changes compiled to warrant a third service pack amendment. So basically speaking, we've broken these down into 3 different chapters. The first is typos, broken references, as obvious inconsistencies. These are the most simple. There's nothing to change except fix the typos, fix the broken references, and fix the obvious inconsistencies. Then we have 2 further chapters. Staff suggested repairs to improve the functionality of the zoning ordinance. These are items that staff has noticed over the past several years. And basically, the issues that we see in the zoning ordinance and our proposed fixes. The last chapter is resident/business inspired issues. These are things that staff has seen have either been brought to us by residents or businesses who wanted to do something, and the zoning ordinance basically inhibited them more than staff thought it should, or they would bring us something that we thought would be not the best for the township, and whatever it was didn't move forward, but we thought it might be good to be proactive and try to correct it before a second similar project came through. So, and each one of these has its own story. So, so let's start out with typos, broken references, and obvious inconsistencies. There are 26 of them. So I will simply start with the first, and basically go through this the same way each time. So the first one is amend section 350.05C definitions to correct an incorrect reference. That's a simple reference that references 350.48C10. It should be 11. Any questions? Moving to the next one, number 2, amend child daycare center to daycare center. We have a number of places within our zoning district schedules. This was a holdover from changes, and we simply didn't change child daycare center to daycare center as had been done elsewhere. So we're going to go back and fix those and make sure everything is consistent within the zoning ordinance to be a daycare center. And we list the number of sections where you see that. Any questions? 3, amending section 350.24C1, the RR1 zoning district schedule, and C2, the RR2 zoning district schedule to maintain consistency with 350.48P3 pet shop. Basically, within the zoning district schedules, we have them, they're simply not listed with bulk criteria. So we want to add that into the 2 zoning districts, RR3 and RR2 zoning district schedules, to make sure that that is consistent with the rest of the zoning ordinance. Any questions? 4, amend section 350.24C, RR zoning district schedule to maintain consistency with 350.48W7 wind energy systems, because in the zoning district schedule, in the use schedule, they are listed as accessory uses throughout all districts. However, they don't show up that way in the zoning district schedule. So we want to make sure that they do show up correctly in the zoning district schedules. So we're going to amend that. Questions? 5, amend section 350.24C7, the R5 zoning district schedule, to maintain consistency with 350.48S12 solar energy system non-residential. This is a similar issue. Basically, they were listed as special exception uses, I believe, and they shouldn't have been. So we're going to take that out. Questions? 6, amend section 350.24C7, the R5, and C8, the R10 zoning district schedule to amend note 20. At the time note 20 was put in, townhouses, we changed the rear yard setback for all townhouses in the township. I think it was 30-foot rear yard setbacks, and then we changed it to, I believe, a 60-foot. We actually listed a number of townhouse developments within the township. At the time, Blue Barn Meadows didn't exist. It had been an approved plan that hadn't actually been built, so it was not included in the list. Well, guess what? They built it. So now we want to put it in there. Any questions? No.
Question. Was it approved in between that timeline that's stated there?
It had been approved before then, but it had the collapse of the economic, the Great Recession basically stopped everything, and we anticipated that it would just die a quiet death. But it was resurrected approximately 9 years after it had been approved and was built. So, or at least is being built. Okay. Moving on to number 7, amend section 350.24C11, which is the general commercial zoning district to maintain consistency with 350.48W4 wholesale sales. I believe within the zoning district schedule, it's listed as wholesale sales with or without incidental retail sales. That is an archaic description that had been changed to simply wholesale sales. That reference was missed during that change. So we want to simply change it to wholesale sales. Any questions? No. Number 8, amend section 350.24C12 of the general commercial 1 zoning district schedule to maintain consistency with 350.48R9 retail sales. Similar thing where under the zoning district schedule, uses the archaic term of retail sales and service. At some point in the update, that was changed from retails and sales and service to retail sales, and this was missed. So we're just going to change it to be consistent. Questions? Number 9, amend section 350.24C14 highway commercial, bulk criteria standards for 3 flats and townhomes. For some reason, everywhere else in the zoning district schedules, 3 flats and townhomes have 12 units per gross acre, 3,600 square feet, minimum lot size, 30 feet minimum frontage, et cetera, et cetera. But under highway commercial, it had something else listed. I believe that was a copy and paste error that was never caught. So we're going to bring those 2 items, bulk criteria, into consistency with where they are in the rest of the zoning ordinance. So we're going to change that within the HC zone to match every other zoning district that townhouses and 3 flats are listed. Questions? 10, amend section 350.24C14 of the HC1 zoning district to maintain consistency with 350.4805 Office Park. Once again, we have a difference of opinion between the zoning district schedule and the use schedule. The use schedule says it's a special exception use. The zoning district schedule says it's not, it's a permitted use. We're going to go with consistency of the zoning district schedule to be permitted use. Questions? 11, amend section 350.24C16, the IC1 zoning district, to maintain consistency with 350.48 R10 retirement facilities. This is a bulk criteria issue. And I think there's inconsistency between the C16 zoning district, which is the IC1, and C7 and 8, which I believe are R5 and R10. So in order to figure out which was right, we went with the R5 and R10 zone. So we're bringing the bulk criteria into consistency throughout the zoning ordinance. Also, be added. And then add that to the primary uses within the IC1 zoning district schedule to make that consistent as well. Any questions? 12, amend section 350.31 F1C1 TND neighborhood infill development to correct the following area and bulk regulations and tables. For some reason on that table under primary use, it was all listed as 5A, 5B, and 5C. I don't know where that came from. The text that is surrounding that all lists 1A, 1B, and 1C. So we're simply changing that to be consistent with the text surrounding it. Questions? 13, amend section 350.31 F3C2C, TND retrofit commercial overlay district off-street parking to correct a broken reference. And that's a holdover from a prior zoning ordinance. We didn't simply catch that reference, so it's updated here. Questions? 14, amend section 350.31 F3E4, TND retrofit to correct incorrect numbering. Apparently we can't count. So section 350, that should not be 6, it should be 4. So we're correcting that. Cannot, no. Well, it's not my native language, so these things happen. 15, repair broken references to section 350.41, and this is a big one. This goes to conditional use. Conditional use basically has the general standards. And for some reason, the zoning ordinance for a long time had it listed in 2 places, under conditional use and then a separate section later on in the zoning ordinance. When we decided that this was kind of odd, we got rid of one of them. Unfortunately, the one we got rid of was the one that had all the references pointing to it. So there are a lot of broken references here. So this section 15 fixes all of them. and it goes on for 9 pages. So that was a big one. Any questions? Moving on to item 16. Amend section 35048 to clarify a number of special exceptions as primary uses, accessory uses, or both. We noted at some point, I think, while going through some of these conditional use hearings, that items that are both conditional use and special exception use, they can be primary uses, but they can also be accessory uses as well, or both. And if they're not listed, that can be confusing. So in this one, we look at the special exceptions, and basically we try to determine which was a primary use, which was an accessory use, and which was both. And so we will add that descriptor within the text of every one of them. And that actually is similar to item 17 for conditional uses as well. So hopefully that will clarify things and make everything more consistent. 18, copy and paste error within 35048A1 accessory dwelling unit attached. It actually mentions detached ADUs. It should not do that. So we're replacing detached with attached. Number 19, amend section 35048. Yes.
Just for my own education,
Yes.
do we have a detached ADU?
Yes, that's actually the next section, 35048A2.
Oh, okay.
So there was probably a copy and paste between the two where we changed one but didn't change the other.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Back to 19, amend section 35048A2. There's your detached. That one we spelled side with the lesser known A spelling. We've then determined that that was not correct. So we'll fix that. 20, amend section 35048B2 bed and breakfasts to clarify an asterisk. Laura was looking through this, trying to determine what this meant, looked at that and was confused and said, why do we even need that asterisk at all? So in order to help out the zoning officer, make it more clear, we'll just remove the asterisk because otherwise the chart works. So any questions? No. 21, amend section 35048C11 coordinated development to repair broken links. Once again, 2 broken links in there that at this point, I don't believe go anywhere. They're holdovers from prior zoning amendments. So we're going to change that and actually name what those are. So we will list the 2 replacement ones. Questions? Next, 22, amend section 35048E1 electric vehicle charging station to clarify a conflict with off-street parking standards. At the very bottom of the definition, we do list that electric vehicle parking spaces should not be counted within the total off-street parking spaces required by section 3504802, which is the off-street parking standards. But we missed the individual use schedules within 35048 of the associated primary use. So we're adding that in just to clarify and make it clear. Questions? Next. 23, amend section 35048F3 farm roadside stand to clarify a conflict between subsections C and E regarding special exception approval. Sometimes I believe that farms require a special exception approval. A farm roadside stand is accessory to that. So the thought is that if the farm gets the special exception approval, you don't need to go back for the roadside stand to get special exception approval. So that was kind of an unclear statement. So we are basically clearing that up by removing the section about the roadside stand shall be a permitted special exception use. Because if the farm gets the exception, we saw no reason for the stand to have to go as well. Questions? Next, 24, amend section 35048S6 self-storage facility to correct where permitted. Apparently the zoning district schedule says they're permitted in the GC and GC1. The use schedule didn't list it. We want them to be consistent, so we went with the zoning district schedule, and we're updating the use schedule. Questions? 25, delete section 350 M3, massage service establishment, and renumber the appropriate sections. The massage service establishment is included within 350-48P2 personal service business. So we would have it listed in two different use schedules. That made no sense. So we're going to remove it and then renumber everything to cover the gap that the removal creates. Any questions? 26, amend section 350-48S9A, short stay medical center definition to correct a typographical error. 10 patents. Patents don't generally go to short stay medical facilities, so we want to make sure that they are patients. And wow, that's it. That was that one. Getting through that one pretty quick. Moving on to the fun part.
Would you like to take a timeout and get a drink?
No, let's pull forward. Any questions from the online?
Nothing in the chat.
Any questions from the audience? No. Moving forward, these are the staff suggested repairs. And let me just make sure that I'm doing some of these correctly, because yes, we are going to skip the first two. Mr. Wilson had sent some comments in, questions in earlier, and they spurred some conversations in staff that still have not yet been resolved on these items. So we will resolve them within staff and bring them back at the next one. So we will skip 1 and 2 of this chapter.
And just for transparency, my comments were speaking to for strictly residential, if driveways could be counted as parking spaces, whether they are or not, if it could just be clearly communicated in the ordinance. And then in terms of buffers, I asked about elevated berms. A lot of municipalities you see they allow for elevated berms, and you could put some landscaping on the elevated berms to
Mm-hmm. I can actually speak to both of them if you like. One of the reasons why we pulled number 1 was because we're still working on clarifying both residential and non-residential off-street parking spaces within the definitions. So we're close to that, but we want to make sure that we've got everything covered. So we will come in with something that the definitions will be slightly longer, but more clear. With regard to the elevated berms, we had a discussion with this, and interesting why we're pulling this is not related to that, but ripple effects. This one, we believe that section 1A, Roman lower novel I, dense hedges of deciduous and at least 50% evergreen shrubbery. Plants shall be maintained at minimum 5 feet height above adjacent grade. If that were placed on a berm, then we believe that would meet the requirements for buffering. To simply put grass or like deciduous trees, unless the berm were 5 feet tall, we feel that that would not provide sufficient screening. So we want to make sure that we are providing at least a 5 foot tall visual screen as what is currently listed provides. So yeah, you can put up a berm, no problem. And as long as it has the visual screening, it would meet the standards. Okay. Moving on to things that we're not skipping. Item number 3, clarify section 350-48D driveways. Basically, in looking at this and working with this section, driveways is kind of a mess. And if you've read the green portion of page 48, the subsections kind of bounce all over the place. There doesn't seem to be a consistent hierarchy within that. So the thought is to tear that apart, build consistent hierarchies within it, and that's what this this will actually result in. We're not really changing very much of the verbiage within. We're just moving it around, making it a little clearer, and making sure the hierarchies are there. So this goes from, for example, subsection 1, driveways, subsection 2, driveways, subsection 3, paving, maintenance, and drainage, subsection 4, location and width of all driveways, which interestingly then has offsets underneath that. So it's just kind of not organized correctly. So we want to tear that apart and reorganize it to a more hierarchical layout. If you have any questions on that?
On D3,
B3.
says required to be maintained at least annually. What does that mean? Like, look at it and make sure it's in good repair, or?
Exactly. What does that mean? And if you look at the changes that we're making in that section under 49, we add in a reasonable condition and remove at least annually.
Okay.
Because you're right, what does that mean?
Right.
I'm sure there are a number of parking lots that are not maintained on an annual basis, but how does the zoning officer enforce that?
Do we define reasonable condition anywhere? Or just like a,
Unfortunately, that becomes one of these things that is
Arbitrary.
arbitrary.
can we say like, sorry, David, like an industry standard of care?
Ooh,
Something?
is there an industry standard?
Well, that goes back to, in engineering, in limitations of liability, terms and conditions, engineers don't warranty work, but we do it within a standard of care. So to me, that would speak to there's developers. But
I think we also have to remember that in a lot of these sections, we want the ability to use the township's interpretation of some of this stuff. So for enforcement reasons, sometimes in some scenarios, I would think it would help Laura for enforcement purposes to have reasonable conditions so that she could interpret it in a way that she feels is necessary.
Can we state something in a reasonable condition pursuant to township zoning officer inspection, review, and then it says it in black and white, it's per the zoning officer's purview.
We could. I think the zoning ordinance is the zoning officer's purview anyway.
Okay.
I think maybe we'll look for more objective standards to add in there so that she's just not relying on, there's a small pothole there, you need to fix that. Yeah, a quarter-sized pothole out there, let's go fix that. Yeah, so we'll see what we can do about finding objective standards for that. Any other questions with this one? Okay. As I said, we will indeed come back with this, make a few changes, let you know what the changes are. If you see anything else in here between now and the next meeting, feel free to email us and let us know your concerns, and we will try to address them by the next meeting as well.
I guess I have one question going back there, just in that same section. Hard surface treatment, does that include crushed stone? Or is this essentially saying that every driveway has to be concrete or paved?
Okay. Yeah. And that is a hard surface treatment provided by the township engineer. And I believe we have gone with predominantly concrete and macadam. However, this does allow for, if somebody wanted to come in with a pervious surface, the township engineer would review it and give a recommendation on that as well. Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's move to the next one. Amend section 350.42F, fences and retaining walls, to require permits for all fences. There was one time, at one point in time, the Board of Commissioners felt that only fences 4 feet or greater should require a permit. Smaller fences, we didn't want to burden the residents. Generally, it's residents, and we're talking about people who move into a house, they want to build a fence. This is generally, we're not talking about land development issues or anything like that. This is predominantly residential. There are some commercial fences that this would apply to, but predominantly residential. And they felt that smaller fences, we shouldn't burden the resident with a regulatory process. And after probably more than a decade of this, it has been staff's experience that what happens is that these small fences start appearing in township easements, in the rights of way, in clear sight triangles. And they stay there for a long time until a problem develops. And then they have to be addressed. And this is because the township is not aware that they were put in the first place. So it's very hard to regulate something in any regulation if you don't know it's there. And permitting generally for something like fences is the way to understand that it's coming in and being there. So given that, the concept was, how can we, well, basically, after discussions with this, we felt that if it's a 4-foot tall fence and somebody wants to kind of go around the ordinance by coming in with a 3-foot, 8-inch fence, they're obviously looking to avoid the ordinance. We felt that at that point, you really should be submitting a permit for this. So we feel that having the requirement for all fences and all retaining walls, not just 4 feet and under, should be a permitted thing. So we can look at it, make sure it's not in a township easement, not in a clear sight triangle, not in the right of way, just to be efficient about it and fair. So this is our proposal.
Do we have a definition of a fence?
And the definition of a retaining wall. Because, I'm thinking one row of block at an edge of a garden, is that a retaining wall?
Mhm.
So I think we need to clarify.
Take a look real quick.
And we're looking it up.
Looking it up.
While she's searching, are invisible dog fences included? Because the edit includes any digging.
That does not. Now, that falls under the PA1 call regulations. So I believe you can hand dig to a certain depth, but any mechanical digging, you have to get a PA1 call. We're more concerned with, obviously blocking clear sight, being off property in the township right of way. A fence, which is basically just wires underneath the ground, that's a little more hard to.
I have one, but also isn't there the presumption here that if the township's issuing a permit for a fence, that the township is going to be the entity rectifying that the fence is within? It's not, but it provides the perception to the homeowner.
That the fence is not.
Within the person's property.
So
Survey.
Oh, no, basically how it works is the township basically works under the opinion that the homeowner knows where their property is. So if they stipulate on a signed permit that they have to do a plot plan, they show it on their property, they sign the permit stating that this is, to their knowledge, true and accurate, then they install the fence there, then we have no problems with it. However, if they don't install it per plan, if they don't know where their property lines are, then the township can come back if there was an issue and basically say, well, you filled out a permit fraudulently. And then it is not on the township. So the township does not do surveys. We don't have the staff to do that. We rely on the homeowner to know where their property is. And this goes for all permitting, building permits of all stripe. So not just fences, but actual houses, sheds, whatnot.
Just to add a little bit more to that, Greg, the township has no jurisdiction to determine boundary lines. So it would become a civil matter if someone pulled a permit and the neighbor calls and, has a discrepancy with where they put it, they say it's on my property. And reason being, because only a professional land surveyor can determine, they actually then would have to go to civil court, county court. It's not determined at a magistrate level either.
I should have clarified. I think I understood that all originally, but I feel like going to no height restriction in this scenario is going to open a bit of a Pandora's box for the number of calls or issues or complaints.
No, wait, did you just say no height restriction? I'm not sure what you're.
No, it's taking the height to 0 for permitting
Right, meaning
purposes.
any fence would come in for a permit. And the reason being, it also protects the residents, because what's happening for fences that don't require a permit under 4 feet, they're installing them incorrectly. And it's leading to them having to rip them out at their cost again. So not only are they installing it where it's either obstruction, which we do have in the ordinance, we cannot obstruct, whether he said the site triangles or driveways, people pulling out of their driveways on curves in the road. There's a multitude of things that can hinder someone's site under this. So it's really ensuring that each resident is installing it properly prior to as well. And by catching them all from 0 feet up, it's really protecting the resident.
Okay. And so then can I go back to the original definition of a fence?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have it?
Yes. An artificially constructed barrier of wood, masonry, stone, wire, metal, or other manufactured material or combination of material erected for the enclosure of areas.
So if I want to put, as an example, wooden stakes in the ground with chicken wire around my garden, I would then have to submit a permit for that?
Sometimes, depending on gardens, no. If it defines a specific area for a dog enclosure, play yard, or to depict property lines, then yes, you would.
And there are
So the exceptions are
The exce-
outlined, I'm assuming?
the exceptions at the bottom of page 53.
Oh, sorry, I missed letter B.
So if you have a very large garden for agricultural purposes, then you're fine.
That's what I was getting at. Agricultural purposes, what's that? Because I have 80 trees on my property. If I put a fence around them and say I'm protecting them from the deer for agricultural purposes so they can grow.
I would say call the zoning officer.
A fence around each one or around the entire property?
Yes.
Because that would, yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to play resident that doesn't know, wants to know, and comes up with that idea of.
So
Do we
this
want to
might
bump
be,
this?
yeah, I was going to say, this is one that we can come back to. I think the takeaway is work on definitions and
scenarios.
clarifying exceptions are the two things that we need to look at with this one.
Do you also need to add a component for maintenance and responsibilities? Because if these fences are sitting on a border and we're approving them from 0 on up, is there some need to make these fences compliant against something?
So that, I'm guessing, and I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that is probably under property maintenance, which is a separate code, and it talks about maintaining your property. I don't know that for a fact, and I can add that to the list to check.
So is there a difference between property maintenance and driveway? Because driveway is specific in terms of maintenance. And I don't know if that's because it's protecting the roadbeds that lead to the driveway or what, but.
There is overlap in a lot of the codes. So property maintenance, I'm sure there's a section that talks about driveways, disrepair. So a lot of times we have, as far as our enforcement capability is, we have the zoning ordinance that we can enforce, and then we also have property maintenance. And it kind of depends on how they come into the office. So we can look into that with regards to maintaining fences and walls.
Yeah, I would just be concerned that if we're permitting fences and then not having any follow-up responsibility, that the neighbor who might be impacted by a deficient fence that was permitted by the township would then turn to the township and say, you approved this, now you walk
So
away.
in that case, it would be an RFI, request for investigation, because it came from a neighbor, and that would probably go through property maintenance.
And oftentimes we just, much like building code or anything like that, it's installed correctly. What happens after that? Certain codes don't address. So, property maintenance code tells you have to paint your house, but the building code doesn't say that you have to paint your house. So there's a number of things, and there are some basically holes in the system.
And there's subjectivity built in, because it doesn't say how often you need to paint your house.
Yep.
And that's why we have designated zoning officers and code enforcement officers to make those interpretations.
And just so you're aware, we don't have to define everything in this. If it's not defined in the ordinance states that it is defined by the latest version of Webster's Collegiate, no, not that, Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. So if fence is not defined in here, it is, but I don't know if retaining wall is. You would go to Webster's Dictionary and get the definition from there. All right, next up, 5. Amend section 350-42V, water and sewer services to correct a residential housing type so listed. Under there, basically speaking, the concept is that for the more intense housing types, you need centralized water and sewer system, generally public, but you can have private systems as well. So currently it reads 2-unit dwellings, townhouses, and apartments. However, since we added 3 flats, that's not included. So we just went with, let's replace the 2-unit dwellings, townhouses, apartments with attached dwelling units, which covers everything, plus what new items we might think of in the future.
Does that include accessory dwelling units?
If they're attached.
Okay.
So,
We'll have to think about that one.
yeah.
Because you can have an attached dwelling unit as part of, included in a single family residential.
That's true, yeah.
So
Actually, I believe if it's an attached ADU, it is still a single family dwelling unit. So therefore, it would not fall under here. Where I would look is the detached ADU and see if that has an impact with this. Because now you have 2 dwelling units on a single property, so that might be an issue.
So the note for that one is look at accessory dwelling units.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we like to have more eyes on this. Number 6, amend section 350-46A, temporary uses by right. This one is similar to the fences and retaining walls. A long time ago, Board of Commissioners thought there were certain things that we don't want to bother having these people come in for permitting. And usually it's like nonprofit events, places of worship, health clinics, items like that.
St. Joseph's the Worker
Yep.
Festival was a big one every year.
Exactly. So what we had here was these number of things that are permitted by right, not requiring a permit. Of course, once again, we attached conditions to them, that they could only be so many times a year, they could only be in certain locations. Well, how do you regulate them without a permit? So we're stuck in that catch-22 of, if you don't come in for a permit, how can we then enforce the regulations on something that doesn't have a permit? So basically speaking, we said, okay, how can we make this work? So what we came up with was the concept of you bring in a permit and we defer the fee until the zoning review is done. And if this does indeed fall under this regulation, then the ordinance says that the Board of Commissioners waives the fee for that permit. So basically, if a place of worship comes in for a festival, they submit the permit, they don't pay a fee initially, and if the zoning officer determines that it does indeed fall under this regulation, then the fee is waived. So it doesn't cost anyone who is meeting, has something that meets this and then has the permit issued to them. That way we have a permit on file. We have any conditions that may be placed upon it listed on the permit, and we know what's going on without charging these organizations for the service. So that's our concept behind this one. Any questions there?
Do you think there's a little bit of an overreach for garage yard sales for residential use? F, is that F?
Well, when the Board of Commissioners required that you can only have 2 in a half a calendar year, how do you enforce that if you don't know they're happening? And we have had garage sales which literally come de facto businesses. They have a garage sale like all the time where they go out, they buy stuff, they bring it and they sell it from their front yard. We've had that. And you get literally a shopping center within a neighborhood based out of a house. The whole neighborhood gets parked up and we get lots and lots of angry people calling us. So yeah, for as you said, somebody's normal garage sale, that's perfectly fine. But this is why we can't have nice things. So
So it's not an overreach.
yeah.
So one thing I will talk about internally is some of these are good to have in place in the ordinance for enforcement purposes. So that if we're notified that somebody's been having 3 garage sales and there's a complaint, we have something to point to in the ordinance that says, here's where you're in violation. So there's some things that I think we need to sit down with code enforcement to see if it makes sense to take out. So I'm a little, we'll come back with that, but I think there's some concern on the code enforcement side that we might need to keep some of this in here.
I have a question about the portable storage units.
Yes.
As you're aware, and maybe not the board, Pods has moved in and they got them everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know how that works with warehousing because it's a warehouse, it's industrial, commercial, but
Right.
I could see them ramping up. And I was just wondering, for their purposes, is that a trailer in the back or is that just pods everywhere?
Well, and that
Stacked 4 high sometime.
That would be under the warehousing regulations, but also under
Outdoor storage.
Outdoor storage. So this is meant for pods being used.
For
And
residents.
Generally residential.
that's another example. We've had pods that have been
Yeah.
there for multiple months.
They
And
turn into a garage.
yes,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's why having this section that explicitly says, here's what you can and can't do, is good for us to go back should we have an RF request for investigation. And I don't know that we want to go through the process every time somebody brings in a pod. So something for us to think about on our end.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, when you get a pod, generally there's only one because you're bringing it in as a resident, maybe 2. It's sort of like a dumpster. If you're doing a renovation, it's an effort to get a dumpster to come in. We've had dumpsters sit for 6 months sometimes, which really annoys neighbors. So it's, and the terrible thing is that when the Board of Commissioners wants us, they actually require us to list all of these things to regulate them, but doesn't give us a means of regulation. It makes our job more difficult. So,
Greg, sorry, over here on G2, for pods or personal storage units, placed within street right away or block vehicular or pedestrian traffic. And we also put nor within clear sight triangles.
mm,
Add that, work that in somehow.
yep. Okay, so we've got some food for thought with that one.
Greg, just,
One more.
I think I understand this. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the edit is essentially just to AI, and then
Yeah, pretty
the
much.
remaining green, the existing green text is staying.
There is an edit, if you go to page 58, the top of page 58,
See,
the clinics.
understood.
We had a number of, during the pandemic, we had a number of clinics who wanted to set up immunizations. And since they weren't overseen by public health officials, we didn't know what to do with them. So basically we decided, okay, if you have people out there doing that sort of thing that aren't overseen by public health officials, maybe it's fine. So, but yeah, you're correct. The bulk of it is just 1A. Okay, we will bring this back.
So I think I was confused.
Uh-oh.
We're only, just to clarify, you're only changing AI.
Yeah, basically
Keeping all of the list of all the uses are staying.
Exactly, yes. It's to take it from
I missed
no
that.
permit required to, yes, permit required. All right, so item 7. Amend section 350-47-3, which I don't think is right. Non-conforming structures and buildings to clarify conditions under which non-conforming buildings or structures may be rebuilt. Basically speaking, the section lists now, if a non-conforming structure or building is destroyed or a portion is destroyed, it may be rebuilt in the same location provided that it meets the standards. As Laura pointed out, well, that means you can demolish it, but then rebuild it exactly in the same place. The point of it being non-conforming is you really want these things that if they're destroyed to replace them with something that is then conforming to zoning. So as she pointed out, other places where she had served has this accident or act of God clause put into it. You can't willfully destroy your building and then rebuild it exactly in the same place if it's non-conforming. So hence the addition of those terms put in there.
So if my house burns down
Right.
and it's non-conforming because I live in an industrial zone, I could rebuild it.
Yes. Unless
A lot of those.
Unless you burned it down.
But if somebody else burns it down, is that an act of God or is that an act of that other person?
I think that's probably arguably
Crime.
an accident or a criminal activity. Yeah.
It's not an act of God.
Not an act of
Unless
God.
God is lightning.
Yeah.
And it's not an accident, so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll do something about that.
Or,
Add in something-
a truck from a warehouse goes over a retaining wall and comes through my house.
Well, and that's an accident. That clearly is an accident.
Unless it's a disgruntled driver.
Well,
Crime.
unless you were the one driving it, at which point it's no longer an accident. Yeah, we have to
That's
make.
for insurance to figure out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as with most things here, there is some interpretation allowed to the zoning officer. So if she feels that, yes, you drove your truck through your house in order to get a better house put in the same spot, then she can make the argument that, no, we're denying that permit. If you don't like it, take it to the zoning hearing board.
Been there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on that one? All right, moving on. Number 8, amend section 350-48 to clarify the order of preferences for uses that contain other uses. The joy. We have some uses that have sub-uses, so to speak. For example, and the big one is coordinated developments. A coordinated development allows different uses on the same property to be basically conforming to the ordinance. Shopping centers are the big ones because you can have a number of different retail uses in a shopping center and it's in conformance. What we then did was broke down and created sub-coordinated developments, shopping centers, flex buildings, office parks, retirement facilities, all meet the definition of coordinated development, but they're also more tightly defined. For example, a shopping center is a type of coordinated development that has a benefit to it of having less parking. Shopping centers tend to share parking, so we allow for a smaller minimum parking requirement there. It technically is a coordinated development, but it's also technically a shopping center. What this does is makes clear that when there is a conflict between those two rules, the higher level is the one that takes precedent. I kind of look at it as the coordinated development is federal regulations, and then the shopping center is like state regulations, or if you will, state regulations and municipal regulations. So you don't want a conflict where the shopping center overrules the higher authority. This makes it clear that no, the higher authority is the ruling authority. Now, we tried very hard to make sure that there are no conflicts between the overarching use and the sub-use. But just in case there is, just in case we missed something, this makes it clear which is the precedent. Any questions? Okay, next one. Number 9, and this one's simple. Back a long way ago, we had dairy and food processing and distribution as a use. Well, times change. So at some point we decided, you know, dairy is food. So having dairy and food processing is a little redundant. Also, it had not been defined in the past, so we added a definition. We also looked at parking requirements. It has parking requirements at this point, but we're adding ancillary retail sales and restaurant uses because basically some dairies now sell ice cream. Some do other, retail sales. So we just want to keep up with the trends. So we're adding off-street parking calculations for that and adding additional regulations for secondary on-site retail sales, consumption of product, stuff like that. So this is merely updating something that we already have to account for current trends that you see in that industry. So if you have any questions with regard to the proposed changes there. If not, we'll move on.
One
And-
sec, sorry.
Oh,
Do the asterisks there have a reference that they go to? Page 62 in the table.
That's interesting. They don't appear to, but I will look at that.
Okay.
Generally, there is a reason, but sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there was a reason and that gets removed and. Okay, I will look at that. Number 10 is reasonably simple. Amend section 350-48G5 golf driving range to clarify the use. This is an ancient thing. I believe this was put in 1968. It may have been because at one point the Allentown golf course was actually inside the township. Now, of course, we don't have any golf courses that I'm aware of in this township, but we have this holdover of golf driving range. I believe down Cedar Point West used to have a driving range down there at one time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this may be a holdover from that. So my main concern in looking at the bulk criteria is you need 7 acres for this, minimum 7 acres. Well, as we all know, now we can have indoor driving ranges. And they generally don't require 7 acres of land. So we want to make it clear that this driving range is for an outdoor facility only. For indoor driving ranges, that meets the definition of a recreation facility. So that is taken care of elsewhere in the zoning ordinance. So should we ever get an indoor driving range, we don't have to worry about them having to have 7 acres for something that probably can only be, requires one or less. So that's what that's all about. Any questions? No. Next one. Another simple one as well. Amend section 35048M9 motor vehicle service facility to clarify the definition. When Wawa first came in, one of the individuals from the applicant's team looked at it and said, hey, hold on here. The gas is a secondary sales. Our primary sales is the retail. So that gas station that's not a motor vehicle service facility. We're like, hold on here. The definition says you're selling gas. So they backed down from their stance. But in order to be clear about this, we want to remove the term secondarily in there because it might be confusing to some people who think, yeah, from a financial standpoint, the gas is only secondary. We make much more money on the retail sales. Therefore, this is not a motor vehicle service facility, which is the South Whitehall Township zoning ease for gas station. So we just want to change that. The other thing is we did do some clarifications in here because we're talking about operation and maintenance of the vehicle, this being open to the general public. Sometimes industrial stuff will have their own maintenance facilities on site. So we want to make sure that this is not what we're talking about here. It's simply gas stations, nor things that service a fleet of vehicles. So that comes out of this and moves into whatever that definition is.
Would you want to put a qualifier there behind the fleet vehicles, like nor activities in support of fleet vehicles exclusively? I don't know if that, technically fleet vehicles can go curbside as well.
I'm not understanding. Can go curbside?
To a public gas station
Oh, yeah.
versus a fleet-owned.
We could do
fueling
that,
station.
yeah. I can see where you could say that a gas station does an activity in support of fleet vehicles.
Like
So
the Exxon can say, well, we support, I might be getting down into weeds too much on it, but they have fleet vehicles that can
Right.
get fuel there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what they brought up previously, could leave a little bit of a loophole there.
okay, we will look at adding exclusively, or if we find better language to address that, we will put that in.
And another thing is, and we've kind of talked about this with regards to the Wawa or Sheets that comes in, is they're kind of a different beast now. They're not a service facility. They're not, your traditional gas station where you have the garage and you're servicing vehicles. So there may be an opportunity, whether it's here now or in the future, of adding a specific use for, and the ITE calls it something like a super convenience store or something.
Yeah.
So perhaps in conjunction with this, we propose a super convenience store to kind of get that ITE.
Well, actually, my thought was that that's something we're going to look at when we update the zoning ordinance. So really, motor vehicle service facility may just go away completely at the next iteration. But between now and then, we may actually get another gas station coming in. And we want to make sure that they're not counted as retail sales, but as an actual gas station. So, but yeah, zoning is always in flux. And with a comprehensive plan coming out, you're going to see a lot of changes come into the next zoning ordinance. But we're not going to see that for at least another 1.5 to 2 years, maybe. So let's fix the problems while we got it. Any questions on that one? Moving forward.
Laura's telling me it's after 9
Oh,
o'clock.
it's after 9 o'clock. Dave, what do you think? You're the boss.
The agenda said to 9:45. But how does everyone feel?
We're down to 41 pages left.
I think if we get up to, I would prefer to get to at least the resident business and stop there, because that's going to be, I have lots of questions there, so.
Okay.
Let's, we try to power through to the end of this.
Okay. Okay. The next one, 12, amend section 350-4802, off-street parking to clarify the requirements for off-street parking spaces. This one is a bit of a cleanup and slight reorganization. One of the things that, as we've seen in definitions, there is a very different line between off-street parking for residential uses and off-street parking for non-residential uses, which includes apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings with apartments in them. So the current regulations kind of bounce back and forth within them, sometimes citing just general parking regulations, sometimes citing only residential, sometimes citing only commercial. What this is an effort to pull out all the residential stuff and put it into one place. And then what's left over is then non-residential. So it makes it a little easier for a zoning officer or even, a layman to look in and see, okay, well, for my house, I'm only really concerned with subsection A1 through 5. So that's pretty much what this is. There have been some clarifications added to them, but for the most part, it's taking stuff that's already there and clumping it into one section.
It's got that maintain annually thing in it again.
Yeah, and there are some overlaps in these sections. So you'll notice the green in here, that's the non-residential stuff that is at this point unchanged. If we change it in another section, it will be changed here.
Okay.
And my only comment is clarification for the residential driveways if they're counted as parking spaces.
Right. And to give a quick answer, we're defining parking spaces, parking aisles, and driveways. 3 different things. And for residential use, the driveway is at a minimum between the cartway of the public street and the property line. So you cannot park there. But once you get onto private property, then your quote unquote driveway is both parking space and parking aisle. So it allows movement around and parking on. Okay. Any questions on 12? Moving on to 13. Amend section 350-4802E3A, off-street parking to remove the prohibition of indented parking spaces from the zoning ordinance. Interestingly enough, the zoning ordinance does not cover street rights-of-way. So this is kind of an archaic and, misplaced section. I'm not quite sure why it was put there in the first place, but it really has no need to be there. The zoning officer does not enforce it. So we'd like to remove it since she doesn't enforce it. And that's pretty much that. Any questions? 14, amend section 350-4802E3A8, off-street parking design standards to require pedestrian safety measures in all large parking lots. For some reason, it only required that in parking lots over 30,000 square feet in commercial and industrial districts. So, but you don't need safe pedestrian in parking lots over 30,000 square feet that serve Township campuses, apartment buildings, I think that's kind of odd.
Schools?
Schools, exactly. So I think we should remove that bit and just, that makes it for all parking lots over 30,000 square feet. Be simple. Any questions? Now, I know you had some comments about ADA routes behind parked cars. That's a zoning call to make sure that the routes proposed are indeed safe. And as you see, our policy is not behind. 15, amend section 350-48P2, personal service businesses, to clarify regulations pertaining to personal service businesses and laundromats. If you read the existing one, you could come away with the idea that laundromats aren't included in this, just because of the sentence structure. It says, but excluding processing, comma, and laundromats. Kind of unclear. Well, we basically want to ensure that laundromats are included in personal service businesses, so we're going to move them around to ensure that it now says, including but not limited to travel agency, laundromat, a dry cleaning storefront for pickup and drop off, but excluding processing, and similar service uses. So then it becomes clear that a laundromat is indeed a personal service business. That's the point of that one. Questions? 16, amend section 350-48 S10E2B1 exempt signs to clarify the regulations regarding drive-through menu boards. Apparently some zoning officers are confused by the term drive-through menu board. It's kind of described in the section, but not actually listed as such. So to help future zoning officers, we're going to actually name it as a drive-through menu board and put it in there. That's all that's for. Questions? Moving on, 17, amend section 350.
Going back. Menu boards, we just looked at the Dunkin'.
Yes, we did.
Would the square for each lane be independent or together? It serves one business, but it's got 2 lanes. And we might have looked at this with the McDonald's at Cedar Crest.
Yeah, we did, and I believe that was the point. It's the lot is limited to 50 square feet.
Got it. Okay.
Much like other signs, the lot is limited to one, what do they call it? Ground mount sign, one pedestal sign. It's,
right.
Yeah, so it's the lot.
Oh, I remember the sign.
Yeah.
The year on it. Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. 17, well, okay, temporary signs, event signs to clarify the use. This was a little unclear. So these are the ones that are the temporary uses permitted by right, not requiring a permit. Once again, how do you regulate signs if you don't have a permit for them? So basically, all we're doing is within this section C, it already states temporary event signs, on-premise signs for temporary events are exempt. We're going to add the statement as listed in section 350-46A1A, temporary uses permitted by right, not requiring a permit, so that we understand that that's what this is. And then going to the temporary event signs, it gives requirements on those signs. So now if you are requiring a permit, now those items, those uses that will now require a permit will also have additional standards if they bring signs into the mix. So that's what this is for.
So a dumpster that says Marth on the side or waste management, is that a sign?
After queuing.
A dumpster that has the name of the waste management on the side of the dumpster, is that a sign?
I've never been asked that question, Brian.
Well, that's why we're here.
Well, I can tell you, it doesn't relate to a dumpster, but I can tell you that there was discussion of that with advertising on cars. When a car is wrapped in vinyl, does that constitute a sign? That's come up. Also, we do not count vinyl on storefront windows as additional signage.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I think this would become a zoning
I would
officer
think,
interpretation.
I would think if the dumpster had the sign of the waste company,
Right.
that would be fine.
But if it had
But to
McDonald's.
advertise McDonald's, I would say that is off-premise signage, which we do regulate.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, because I believe a pod has
they
a very
have-
large logo on it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a distinction between markings and a sign.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that that's what you really want to
Mhm.
And
focus on.
we've had trucks parked in locations
Mhm.
that have not moved,
Mhm.
and it becomes a sign because they're not moving. And so there's certain things
There's
that's
trucks that
related.
have billboards.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
there's a kind of a balance between the use of that temporary equipment and, how long it's there and things like that. So that's part of the interpretation piece that makes Laura's job so much fun.
Now you can go back to menu boards.
Probably reading too much into it, but is a sign a logo? And is a logo a sign?
Based on that,
Sorry.
I think we do touch,
I'm not trying to extend the time or anything.
I
but
think we
that-
do touch base on that.
Thinking about it.
It might be in a definition. We do use logo, symbol, insignia, words, letters as part of it,
Okay.
as a definition under sign. So it is included, yeah. So a logo would be a sign.
Okay,
Yep,
yeah,
you're
sorry I missed it. I just started down the rabbit hole, so I'll just add
Just
to it.
followed it.
Yeah. Pile on. The one legal process.
Followed them right down that hole.
Greg and I are having flashbacks to when we did the sign ordinance 10 years ago. Whatever
Oh,
it was.
more than that, yeah. And we keep saying we've got
And
to
then we
come
had
back.
all the billboard companies come in and try to
Yeah.
fight us on digital and
Yep.
anyway,
Yeah. Anyway,
sorry to digress the meeting.
two left.
The language at the bottom of 75 that's being added
Mhm.
did not say
I'm going to look at that.
not requiring a permit.
Because if you pass one, what's the impact on the other?
Right.
So I've got a note here, impact of requiring permits. So make sure that if you pass both, they've both got to be consistent. So yeah. All right, 18, amend section 35048 S10E 2F exempt signs, flags, to clarify regulations regarding flags. This is a fun one. Oh, this is.
Andrew flag.
Yeah. No. One G, not two. Yeah, it is, truly. I can recall, yeah, 3 Gs, actually.
3 Gs.
I can recall sending numerous zoning ordinance amendments over to the LVPC and having a comment come back. You need to change your flag ordinance. It's not, well, they didn't say unconstitutional, but they kind of alluded to that. And of course, this was always around stuff. We were changing something else, but we never really touched the flags thing. So I've held on to that one for a long time. And finally, I really want to make Becky Bradley happy. So I'm going to remove the bit about number of flags that you can have. So basically, the concept is remove the number, maximum 35-foot square on a standard flagpole, remove all that. Basically, we're concerned more with health and welfare, so safety. Should a flagpole be used, each flagpole should be a maximum of 30 feet height and set back a distance equal from lot line, so that if it falls, which, have you ever seen a flagpole fall? But I guess they can. It falls on property. So we're trying to remove the other stuff. So that's all we're doing. Any questions? Moving on to 19, and ostensibly the last one. Amend section 35048 S10E8 general sign regulations to clarify the sign regulations for grand openings. This is another one of those permit by right. So basically, the regulation was, yes, it's for a period of 7 days from the date of the opening of the new establishment. We're removing that and adding in, well, in conjunction with temporary uses permitted by right, not requiring a permit in the aforementioned section, are associated with temporary use shall be limited to timeframes specified within the temporary use period. I think we had an inconsistency between how long you could have the grand opening and how long the signs, flags, and other things could be open. So we're trying to make them consistent.
How about grand reopening?
I'll leave that to the zoning officer.
This is a big one. I mean, this is a big one. We have, basically just don't allow any banners or flags or anything. It's hard. People are trying to get around the grand opening for 7 days, and then it comes into a cost thing. They don't want to spend thousands of dollars on these flag pennants for 7 days, which they can go and get a permit or whatever, but, it would actually go to the zoning hearing board, if they wanted to have it longer. Yeah, so I want to look at this one a little bit more.
And is that 7 calendar days or
Yeah,
business
7.
days? Like if they're only open Monday through Friday.
Yeah, 7 days
It
from
just
the,
says a period of 7 days, so I would say 7 days, not business days, 7 days.
7 consecutive days.
Mhm.
So there we are. We are now at the end of the staff, and we're at the resident business inspired issues section, which has another, I don't know, 12, I think? 15.
I think that's good for
Good for now?
next meeting, so we have fresh minds.
Had a good night's work?
More agenda items.
Yep. Well, I thank you for your patience, your attention. As I said, you can go through, and if you go through any of these again and see something that pops into your head, shoot me an email. If it's a question, we'll try to address it for the next time. So thank you.
All right, agenda item number 7, transportation update. Tony.
Thank you. Really one item here, 309 and Tillman Street interchange. We've heard about this project coming for a while. They've hit a little bit of a speed bump. They're looking at redoing some of the utilities that are out there, so that may set them back a little bit, but the project's still moving forward. Actually, we were, the township personnel was invited to an emergency services coordination meeting so that, at the end of the month here, actually in about a week, it's the end of the month. But what that's going to do is help townships create input during the entire construction project. So I think that's a good thing to have. So we'll let you know what happens at that meeting next month. That's it.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Tony. Agenda item number 8, comp plan update.
So I think, so what we were doing with comprehensive plan update, we were saving them all for the end, and during meetings, people weren't sticking around to the end of the meeting to get the comp plan update. So what we were trying to do was have a preview at the beginning of the meeting. And I think it was also when we were doing a lot more updating and we weren't holding the workshops. So it may be something where we take this off of this part of the agenda and just have the update at the beginning until we, especially because we're meeting on those workshops, I think it's probably appropriate because my update is the update I gave at the beginning. So
That's, thanks for the suggestion. I think we can talk offline. We don't need to make a decision right away, but. All right, agenda item number 9, courtesy of the floor. Is anyone online?
there are people online, but no comments in the chat.
Greg?
Yes. We've received 3 applications. So next month in August, we will be seeing Ridge Farm Final Plan Phase 1B again. We will be seeing 1670 Mock Chunk Road Pata Properties again. We saw it 2 times as a sketch, I believe. Did some good work with them, and now they're coming back as preliminary final. And lastly, we have a new application, Montar Properties LLC Self-Storage Facility. For those of you who know the Person Stables, well, not long for this world. So they are a preliminary final plan next month as well. So those are the 3 projects that we will be seeing in August.
All right, agenda item number 10. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.